The pristine corridors of the Galactic Academic Institute had never witnessed anything quite like what walked through their main entrance on the first day of the new semester. Madison Walsh, age 17 and blissfully unaware that she was about to trigger an institutional crisis, strolled past the ornate welcome banners with the casual confidence of someone who had never met a situation she couldn't handle. Behind her, connected by what appeared to be a standard leash, followed something that made the Academy's seasoned security chief reach for his emergency communicator. "Is that?" Security Director Krax began, his four eyes focusing independently on the creature that was currently sniffing the decorative fountain with obvious interest. "Is that what I think it is?" "A therapy animal," Madison replied cheerfully, scratching behind what might charitably be called ears on a creature that looked like someone had crossed a leopard with a scorpion and given it anger management issues. "This is Bandit. Say hi, Bandit." Bandit opened its mouth in what was probably meant to be a friendly gesture, revealing rows of fangs that glistened with something that definitely wasn't saliva. A soft hissing sound emerged, accompanied by what appeared to be a small puff of vapor. "Student Walsh," Director Krex said carefully, "that appears to be a Terran Venom Spitter." "Yup," Madison confirmed with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for discussing favorite hobbies. "Bandit's been my emotional support companion since I was 12. The paperwork's all in order. Certified therapy animal, full psychological evaluation, the works. But Venom Spitters are..." Director Krex consulted his handheld database with the desperate efficiency of someone hoping reality might change if he checked the facts again. "They're classified as Class 7 predatory threats. They're banned from every civilized planet in the galaxy." "Well, that's just discriminatory," Madison said, giving Bandit an affectionate pat that would have required immediate medical attention for any other species. "Bandit's never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. Have you, buddy?" Bandit made a sound that could have been agreement, or could have been the noise that preceded violent death. Director Krex wasn't particularly interested in finding out which. The registration office of the Galactic Academic Institute had processed enrollment paperwork for over 3,000 species across 47 different star systems. They had forms for beings made of pure energy, collective consciousness entities, and at least one student who existed only on Tuesdays. None of their extensive bureaucratic experience had prepared them for this situation. "Miss Walsh," Dean Thylex explained with the patience of someone who had spent centuries dealing with complicated students, "while we appreciate the documentation you've provided, our campus regulations specifically prohibit apex predators, venomous entities, and anything capable of dissolving organic matter." Madison examined the paperwork she'd spread across the dean's desk with the thoroughness of someone who had clearly dealt with bureaucratic objections before. According to Article 47 of the Galactic Education Access Act, no student can be denied enrollment based on medical necessity accommodations. Bandit is my certified emotional support animal, prescribed by Dr. Henderson of the Terran Psychological Health Institute. "But surely there were other options," Dean Thylax began. "We tried a regular therapy dog first," Madison interrupted, "but Bandit ate it. Accidentally. Well, mostly accidentally. Anyway, after that, Dr. Henderson said that Bandit was clearly the better choice for my emotional stability, and legally you can't argue with a medical professional's assessment." Dean Thylex looked at the documentation again, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been the early stages of administrative panic. The paperwork was, unfortunately, completely legitimate. Madison Walsh had somehow managed to get a Class 7 predatory threat certified as a therapy animal, and according to galactic law, the Academy had to accommodate her medical needs. "Where exactly?" Dean Thylex asked weakly. "Did you acquire a Venom Spitter?" "Pet store," Madison replied, casually. "Well, technically it was an exotic animal rescue, but same difference. Bandit was a rescue case. Someone had been keeping him as a guard animal, but he's way too social for that kind of work. He loves meeting new people." At the mention of meeting new people, Bandit perked up and began looking around the office with the kind of interest usually displayed by hunting predators evaluating potential prey. The advanced xenobiology classroom had been designed to accommodate students from diverse atmospheric and gravitational requirements. What it had not been designed for was the kind of show-and-tell presentation that was currently unfolding in front of 23 increasingly horrified alien teenagers. "So this is Bandit," Madison announced to the class, completely oblivious to the fact that half her classmates had instinctively moved to the back of the room. "He's a Terran Venom Spitter, about 4 years old, and he weighs roughly 60 pounds. His species is native to what humans call the Amazon rainforest, which is basically a giant biological weapons factory that somehow evolved into a tourist destination." Professor Ganthis, who had been teaching xenobiology for longer than most civilizations had existed, found himself taking notes on a creature that wasn't supposed to exist on any habitable planet. "The venom," Madison continued with the casual tone of someone discussing homework assignments, "is primarily neurotoxic, but it also has some really interesting enzymatic properties. One bite can paralyze most organic life forms, and the enzymes start breaking down tissue for easier digestion. Super efficient from an evolutionary standpoint." A student, in the front row, a nervous crystalline who had been eager to learn about Earth biology, made a sound like breaking glass and promptly fainted. "Oh, and the venom is also psychoactive in some species," Madison added helpfully. "Bandit's bite can cause hallucinations, temporary madness, or in some cases a really profound sense of existential dread. We're not really sure why evolution decided that was necessary, but Earth's ecosystem is pretty competitive." 2 more students fainted. "The really cool part is how he hunts," Madison continued, warming to her subject. "Venom spitters are ambush predators, but they're also incredibly intelligent. Bandit can solve puzzles, use tools, and he's even figured out how to open doors. Sometimes I come home and find him rearranging the furniture." Professor Ganthis raised a trembling appendage. "Miss Walsh, you mentioned that Earth's ecosystem is competitive. Could you elaborate on what constitutes competitive in Terran biology?" Madison brightened considerably, clearly delighted to have found someone interested in her favorite subject. "Oh, that's the best part. See, most people think Earth is just this peaceful little garden world, but actually, pretty much everything there is trying to kill everything else. Bandit species exists because the rainforest is basically nature's version of a gladiator arena. Only the most creative killers survive." She gestured to Bandit, who was currently investigating the classroom's ventilation system with the kind of professional interest that suggested he was mapping escape routes. "Humans evolved right alongside creatures like Bandit, which is why we're naturally compatible. We learned to coexist with things that could dissolve us from the inside out. So we developed really good threat assessment skills and an unusually high tolerance for mortal danger." The remaining conscious students were now pressed against the far wall, watching Bandit with the horrified fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. "The thing most galactic species don't understand about Earth," Madison concluded with the cheerful authority of someone delivering educational content, "is that it's not actually a death world. It's more like a university for learning how to survive anything. Humans aren't tough because we're special, we're tough because everything on our planet has been trying to kill us for millions of years, so we got really good at not dying." Professor Ganthis looked at his lesson plan, which had been focused on introducing students to the concept of moderately dangerous ecosystems, and quietly began rewriting the entire xenobiology curriculum. The Academy's cafeteria had been designed to accommodate the dietary needs of hundreds of different species, from photosynthetic beings who absorb nutrients through specialized lighting to methane breathers who required carefully controlled atmospheric chambers. What it had not been designed for was the sight of Madison Walsh unpacking what appeared to be a terrarium full of live creatures for her pet's lunch. "Bandit gets cranky if he doesn't eat every few hours," Madison explained to her lunch companions, a group of alien students who had been brave enough to sit at her table despite the warning signs. "I brought some of his favorite snacks from home." She opened the portable habitat with the casual efficiency of someone performing a routine task, revealing what looked like a collection of insects, small lizards, and several things that defied easy classification, but definitely qualified as still moving. "Those are," stammered Zix, a crystalline student whose translucent form was now flickering with obvious distress. "Those are still alive." "Of course they're alive," Madison replied as if this was the most natural thing in the galaxy. Bandit won't eat anything that's not fresh. He's kind of picky that way. She selected what appeared to be a beetle the size of a dinner plate and held it up for Bandit's inspection. "What do you think, buddy? The rhinoceros beetle or the huntsman spider?" Bandit's response was immediate and enthusiastic. He plucked the beetle from Madison's hand with delicate precision and proceeded to consume it in a way that made several nearby students excuse themselves from the cafeteria entirely. "The beetles are from our backyard," Madison continued conversationally while Bandit worked through his appetizer. "The spiders I ordered online. You can get pretty much any earth creature delivered nowadays as long as you have the proper import permits." The emergency evacuation alarm began sounding approximately 30 seconds later when someone in the cafeteria's monitoring station realized that the human student had just released what amounted to a portable ecosystem of apex predators into their dining facility. "L students proceed to designated emergency stations," the announcement echoed through the cafeteria. "This is not a drill. We have a Code 7 biological hazard situation in the main dining hall." Madison looked around at the rapidly emptying cafeteria with obvious confusion. "Did I miss something? It's just lunchtime." The mandatory safety briefing had been hastily organized by Dean Thylex in an attempt to educate the student body about the potential dangers of Earth-based life forms. What he hadn't anticipated was Madison's helpful offer to provide visual aids for the presentation. "So this is me when I was 8, Madison announced, projecting a home video onto the main screen with the enthusiasm of someone sharing vacation photos. "I'm helping my dad relocate a family of rattlesnakes that had moved into our garage." The footage showed a small human child calmly handling serpents that were easily twice her size, while an adult human explained proper snake-wrangling techniques. "The key is to stay calm and move slowly," Madison narrated, as her 8-year-old self demonstrated the fine art of venomous reptile management. "Rattlesnakes are actually pretty chill if you respect their personal space and don't make sudden movements." Half the audience had already left. "Oh, and here's me at summer camp." The video switched to show Madison, slightly older, participating in what appeared to be a recreational activity involving crocodilian creatures and small watercraft. "This was my first time kayaking with alligators. Super fun, although you have to watch out for the really big ones during mating season." Professor Ganthis, who had been taking notes throughout the presentation, raised his hand with obvious academic interest. "Miss Walsh, what exactly constitutes summer camp activities on Earth?" "You know, normal kid stuff. Swimming, hiking, learning basic survival skills, identifying which plants and animals can kill you and which ones are just painful. Pretty standard childhood education." The remaining audience members were now questioning every assumption they'd ever made about child development and planetary habitability. The emergency faculty meeting convened 3 hours after the cafeteria incident, with Dean Thylex attempting to address what was rapidly becoming an institutional crisis. "We need to discuss the Walsh situation," Dean Thylex announced to the assembled professors, administrators, and increasingly nervous board members. "She's clearly dangerous," declared Professor Vorthis of the Safety Department. "Any student who brings live predators to lunch represents an unacceptable risk to campus security." "Actually," interrupted the Academy's legal advisor, a methodical being who rarely spoke unless regulations were involved, "we've reviewed Miss Walsh's academic credentials. Her pet has apparently completed several online certification courses in interspecies communication, conflict resolution, and advanced mathematics." The silence that followed was broken by Dean Thylex's weak voice. "The pet has academic credentials. Technically, Bandit scored higher on the standard Galactic intelligence assessment than 63% of our current student body," the legal advisor continued with mechanical precision. "According to Educational Code 847, we cannot discriminate against academically qualified entities regardless of their biological classification." "Are you telling us," Professor Ganthis asked slowly, "that we can't expel a student whose therapy animal is more academically accomplished than most of our professors?" "Field appears to be the situation, yes." Dean Thylex looked at the emergency protocols manual, then at the legal documentation, then at the growing stack of incident reports from Madison's first week of classes. "What exactly?" he asked, with the resignation of someone watching his career enter uncharted territory. are we supposed to do with a student whose normal existence violates our fundamental understanding of survivable biology? The legal advisor consulted his database one more time. Apparently, we're supposed to update our curriculum. The recreational period at the Galactic Academic Institute had been carefully designed to promote healthy interaction between species while minimizing the risk of interstellar incidents. The playground equipment was rated for multiple gravity levels, the atmosphere was adjusted to accommodate diverse respiratory systems, and the activities were specifically chosen to avoid triggering any known territorial or predatory instincts. No one had planned for Madison's interpretation of fetch. "Okay, Bandit," Madison called out, holding what appeared to be a standard recreation disc high above her head. "Let's show everyone how we play back home." She launched the disc with the kind of casual athleticism that came from growing up in an environment where inadequate physical coordination could result in becoming someone else's lunch. The disc sailed across the playground in a perfect arc, spinning with precise aerodynamic efficiency. Bandit's response was immediate and spectacular. He launched himself into the air with the fluid grace of a creature designed by evolution to catch things that really didn't want to be caught, executing a mid-air maneuver that would have impressed physics professors and terrified anyone with basic survival instincts. The problem wasn't Bandit catching the disc. The problem was what happened when he landed. "Incoming predator!" screamed a group of tentacled collective students who suddenly found themselves directly in Bandit's flight path. Their species' defensive instinct was to release biochemical alarm pheromones, which triggered a cascade response among the other playground occupants. The crystalline students immediately shifted into their defensive formation, creating geometric barriers that were designed to withstand seismic events, but apparently hadn't been tested against enthusiastic Earth predators. The insectoid collective began their traditional threat assessment dance, which involved rapid wing vibrations that created a high-pitched humming that made several species' communication organs malfunction. Bandit, completely oblivious to the panic he was causing, proudly returned the disc to Madison, while approximately 47 different species activated their emergency protocols. "Good boy," Madison praised, scratching behind his ears while chaos erupted around them. "That was an excellent catch." "Miss Walsh," came the strained voice of Recreation Supervisor Kelvex over the emergency communications system, "please control your companion. We have 17 different species currently in defensive mode, and the Hive Mind Collective is threatening to file a formal complaint with the Interspecies Relations Council." Madison looked around at the playground, which now resembled a small-scale war zone, with obvious confusion. "But we're just playing fetch. This is normal recreational behavior." "On what planet is this considered normal recreation?" Supervisor Kelvex demanded. "Earth," Madison replied simply. "We play with our predators all the time. It's good exercise for everyone involved." The diplomatic incident report would later note that this was the first time in galactic history that recreational activities had been classified as a potential act of war. The bullying started on day 4, which was actually longer than Madison had expected. In her experience, it usually took about 48 hours for the locals to decide that the weird new kid needed to be put in her place. Thorgrim and his pack, 3 warrior caste Valorians who had been held back multiple academic cycles due to their preference for intimidation over studying, had apparently decided that Madison's claims about Earth being dangerous were personally offensive to their species' reputation as the galaxy's premier military culture. "So the little human thinks she's from a scary planet?" Thorgrim announced, loudly enough for half the corridor to hear, while his companions flanked Madison near her locker. "Earth isn't even classified as a real Deathworld. It's just a garden planet with delusions of grandeur." Madison, who was currently trying to organize her textbooks while Bandit explored the interesting smells coming from the ventilation system, looked up with mild interest. "I'm sorry, did you say something?" "I said your planet is fake," Thorgrim repeated, clearly expecting a more dramatic response. "Humans are just soft little creatures who make up stories about being tough. Everyone knows real warriors come from actual military worlds." "Okay," Madison replied agreeably, returning to her books. "If you say so." The casual dismissal was apparently more insulting than any argument could have been. Thorgrim's face shifted through several colors that indicated escalating aggression levels, while his companions moved into positions that were clearly meant to be threatening. "You think you're so special with your little pet," one of them sneered, gesturing dismissively at Bandit. "That thing wouldn't last 5 minutes on a real warrior world." That was when Madsen's expression changed. "Excuse me?" she said quietly, turning to face the bullies with the kind of sudden stillness that preceded either very reasonable conversations or very unreasonable violence. "Your pet?" Thorgrim repeated, apparently missing the shift in atmospheric pressure that more observant species had immediately noticed. "It's just another fake Earth creature. Probably not even really dangerous." Madison's smile was the kind that made smart people remember they had urgent business elsewhere. "Would you like to test that theory?" The response from Bandit was immediate and comprehensive. One moment he had been casually investigating ceiling tiles, the next he was directly between Madison and the bullies, every line of his body communicating the kind of focused attention usually reserved for terminal hunting situations. The venom sacs along his throat began to glow with bioluminescent warning patterns that hadn't been seen outside of Earth's deadliest ecosystems. His scales shifted to what Madison recognized as serious business coloration, while his tail, previously relaxed and casual, now moved with the kind of precision that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. "Bandit doesn't like it when people threaten me," Madison explained conversationally. "It triggers his protective instincts. On Earth, that usually ends with someone needing emergency medical attention." Thorgrim, whose species prided itself on never backing down from a fight, took one look at Bandit's threat display and made a sound that definitely wasn't consistent with his warrior reputation. "The funny thing about Earth evolution," Madison continued, while Bandit demonstrated why apex predators didn't need to be large to be absolutely terrifying, "is that we developed alongside creatures like Bandit. So we learned that the best way to handle bullies is to let our friends handle them for us." The confrontation ended with 3 Valorian warriors discovering that their species' legendary combat training had not included modules on how to deal with emotionally attached Earth predators, and Bandit demonstrating that his venom's psychoactive properties were particularly effective on beings who already had anger management issues. No permanent physical damage was inflicted, but all 3 bullies would spend the next week experiencing vivid hallucinations about being hunted by creatures that their nightmares couldn't adequately describe. Principal Vex had dealt with disciplinary issues involving 17 different species, 43 distinct cultural conflicts, and at least one incident that had required intervention from the Galactic Peace Council. None of his extensive experience had prepared him for the current situation. "Miss Walsh," he began carefully, "while we appreciate that your companion was acting in your defense, the method of that defense has created some complications." Madison, who was sitting in the principal's office with Bandit curled contentedly at her feet, looked genuinely concerned. "Are Thorgrim and his friends okay? Bandit didn't mean to hurt them, he was just being protective." "They're physically unharmed," Principal Vex confirmed. "But they're currently in the medical bay receiving treatment for what our psychiatric staff describes as species-specific existential terror. Apparently your companion's venom has given them the ability to perceive threats that exist on multiple dimensional levels." "Oh, that's normal," Madison said with relief. "The hallucinations usually wear off in a few days. It's like a really intense nature documentary, but you're experiencing it from the prey's perspective." Principal Vex consulted his disciplinary manual, which suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. "Miss Walsh, the problem isn't the effectiveness of your companion's defensive response. The problem is that according to Galactic Education Code, we're required to discipline students who engage in violence on campus." "But Bandit was just protecting me," Madison protested. "Yes, but the method of protection involved chemical weapons that are banned under 14 different interspecies treaties." Madison frowned thoughtfully. "Are you saying Bandit broke the law?" "Well, no," Principal Vex admitted reluctantly. "The treaties specifically apply to manufactured weapons. Natural biological defenses are technically exempt, provided they're used in legitimate self-defense situations, so Bandit didn't do anything wrong. Legally, no. But practically, he's solved our bullying problem through methods that have traumatized our entire security staff and may require grief counseling for several species. Madison brightened considerably. So it worked out. Thorgrim won't bother me anymore and nobody got permanently hurt. That's what we call a win-win situation on Earth. Principal Vex looked at his disciplinary manual, then at the psychological evaluation reports, then at Bandit, who was currently engaged in what appeared to be friendly conversation with the office plant. "Miss Walsh," he said finally, "I'm going to do something I've never done in my entire administrative career. I'm going to file this incident under successful conflict resolution and recommend that your companion be added to our campus security consultation program." "Really? That's great. Bandit loves helping people solve problems." As Madison and Bandit left the office, Principal Vex made a note in his personal log. Recommendation: update student handbook to include Earth-specific behavioral norms. Also, request immediate psychological support for administrative staff. The parent-teacher conference had been scheduled as a routine administrative meeting to discuss Madison's academic progress and social integration. What arrived at the Academy's main entrance 3 days later was a family reunion that immediately triggered every biosecurity protocol in the Galactic education system. "Sorry we're late," announced Dr. Patricia Walsh, stepping out of the family transport with the casual confidence of someone who had never met a problem she couldn't solve with applied science. "We had to make a few stops to pick up the gang." Behind her emerged Dr. Robert Walsh, carrying what appeared to be a standard travel case until it started moving on its own. "The kids missed Bandit," he explained to the increasingly panicked reception committee. "We thought this would be a good opportunity for a family visit." The kids turned out to be a collection of Earth creatures that made Bandit look like a conservative pet choice. A 6-foot python draped casually around Dr. Walsh's shoulders, something that looked like a cross between a ferret and a small dragon peered out of his wife's backpack, and the travel case contained what they cheerfully identified as just a few tarantulas for show and tell. "These are our household pets," Dr. Walsh explained to Principal Vex, whose crystalline form was now flickering with what might have been the early stages of system failure. "We thought it would be educational for the other students to meet some of Madison's siblings." "Siblings?" Principal Vex managed. "Well, adopted siblings," Dr. Walsh clarified. "But they're all part of the family. On Earth, we believe in inclusive child-rearing that teaches respect for all forms of life, no matter how many teeth they have." When Dr. Patricia Walsh announced that she'd brought visual aids for the conference, no one had anticipated that those aids would include footage of Madison's normal summer activities. The presentation that followed redefined the Academy's understanding of both childhood development and parental responsibility. "This is Madison's junior naturalist camping trip," Dr. Walsh explained, projecting video of her daughter casually handling creatures that violated several basic principles of survival. "She's working on her wilderness survival badge. That's where she learned to identify edible insects and safe drinking water sources." The footage showed Madison, age 14, cheerfully constructing shelter while surrounded by creatures that most galactic species would classify as immediate extinction threats. "And here she is practicing her animal husbandry skills," Dr. Walsh continued, as the video switched to Madison bottle feeding what appeared to be infant predators. "We believe hands-on experience is essential for proper education." Professor Ganthis, who had been taking notes throughout the presentation, finally raised his hand. "Dr. Walsh, what exactly constitutes safe learning environment standards on Earth?" "Well, we make sure the kids wear appropriate protective gear, carry emergency medical supplies, and always travel in groups," Dr. Walsh replied. "Plus, Madison's been certified in wilderness first aid since she was 12. When the Academy's Cultural Exchange Committee received Madison's application for a simple educational field trip to Earth, they initially assumed it would be a routine approval process. The detailed itinerary that accompanied the application forced them to completely reconsider their definition of educational risk assessment. "Day 1, read Committee Chair Thylex with growing horror, hiking through what they call slightly dangerous terrain to observe moderately aggressive wildlife in their natural habitat. Day 2, swimming with friendly marine predators in reasonably safe ocean environments. Day 3, camping in areas described as minimally life-threatening while learning basic survival techniques. Committee member Vortis looked up from his own copy of the itinerary. What do they mean by minimally life-threatening? According to the attached documentation, Thylax continued weakly, it means only a moderate chance of encountering creatures that could kill and eat a fully grown human, and they consider this appropriate for an educational field trip. Apparently, this is what human children do for recreational summer camps. The committee sat in stunned silence as they realized that what Madison's family considered a safe learning environment would qualify as a military survival exercise for most galactic species. The final accreditation review was conducted by a panel of the galaxy's most distinguished educational experts, who arrived expecting to evaluate routine academic standards, and instead found themselves documenting the most comprehensive curriculum revision in institutional history. In summary, announced Review Board Director Kelvex, the Walsh family's enrollment has necessitated fundamental changes to our understanding of biological education, safety protocols, and the basic definition of survivable learning environment. The Academy's new standards manual, now officially titled Post-Human Educational Guidelines, established Earth as the baseline measurement for planetary danger assessment. The classification system now ranged from Earth Normal, suitable for advanced survival training, to Galactic Safe, appropriate for species with basic self-preservation instincts. The revised xenobiology curriculum included mandatory courses in practical Deathworld biology, advanced predator psychology, and interspecies survival ethics. Madison had been appointed as a student consultant for curriculum development, while Bandit held the unprecedented position of educational support predator. The most significant change, Director Kelvex noted in his final report, is our recognition that human educational standards represent the most comprehensive preparation for galactic survival challenges. Their children are demonstrably better prepared for real-world dangers than our most advanced graduate students. The report concluded with a recommendation that shocked the galactic academic community. Earth should be considered for designation as the galaxy's premier educational institution for advanced survival training. But the final note in Director Kelvex's personal files contained the question that would haunt galactic educators for generations. If this is what human children bring to school as normal educational preparation, what exactly are they hiding in their advanced military training programs? The answer to that question, most galactic leaders quietly agreed, was probably better left undiscovered.